Well, yeah, I scan them. And thank you for coming tonight to hear Justin and Rebecca speak. Tonight they're going to be talking about the symbols of oppression, the subtler colonial use of native stereotypes to convey a meaning. Justin Schaap is a member of the Seneca Deer Clan. He's also professor of Indigenous Studies and among other academics. We also have Rebecca Bowen. She's a Seneca Bear Clan, and she's also a Seneca historical educator. People that don't know that about Rebecca, she's sought after to come speak on Indigenous rites of passage, so to speak, with women. She's actually talking with a group of young people about just that and the removal. So I'm just going to let them take over, and welcome and thank you for being here.
Where do you want to sit?
Under his apology.
Yay.
His manager.
Whichever side. So we're over here. Well, thanks for having us. This is a huge honor to sit next to one of my heroes. So if you don't mind me just adding to the flowery bio of Becky. I grew up, and the first thing I learned about Becky is that she was an activist and a part of AIM, and that might take her back a ways. But that's when I realized that she was going to be someone amazing in my life, and she always has been. I worked with her in the Kinzu Dam, and she's one of my mentors. And coming into the nation, when I worked in Tribal Historic Preservation Office and in the archives. So I'm super happy to sit here, and I'm super happy every single time I hear her speak, I try to come and listen and kind of bring back some of that nostalgic learning. So hopefully that can, so I'm super excited, and so this came from a previous presentation here at the library, and during that presentation, people were saying, "Hey, we want to talk about some other kind of Indigenous identity issues," and one of those was something that happened here and across New York State and related to mascot use. And so from that, we kind of convinced Becky to come and present us how this. Maybe we told her she was going to, and that's how this presentation came about. So hopefully it's organic like that. It's nothing that we kind of planned or said, hey, we want to go and do this. But it's also something that we work on all the time. So I think we have these lived experiences, and part of these lived experiences allows us to talk about these things from an academic perspective and from a personal perspective. So on that, I'm going to get going, because I'm going to lead into Becky's presentation. I haven't seen hers and she hasn't seen mine, so hopefully we kind of work off each other. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about symbols of oppression. I'm only going to show these things like one time because I don't really appreciate them, and I'm gonna, hopefully you'll understand why, because I think they do psychological damage to us every single time we look at them, whether we agree with it or not. It's not up to us. We don't actually control our brains. We don't actually control society and the organization of this. And until these things change over time, which they may, when we look at these things, we internalize them and they cause harms to us. And that's not me saying it, that's the experts. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But this is us. This is Maggie Bowen at the last Remember the Removal, I believe. And this is me last year in Jamestown doing a talk. Just trying to have fun, being active in the community. That's what these are supposed to show. What are you doing here, Becky? You're doing
I believe I'm reading a speech that my sister gave a number of years ago at
Okay.
Remember the Removal.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Okay. And I think this is Sachem, maybe, next to you. Is that right? Jeff Gill?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, yes, it's true.
Okay. So I'm going to start about stereotypes, because this is supposed to be my role. I'm going to kind of lay this out. What are they? And give out some what's actually being like positioned. So stereotypes when it comes to Indigenous identity, and who's asking for change, and why are these things considered stereotypes. So we look up here and we see, I just use images for stereotypes, and we see stereotypes. One of them is supposed to be, hey, I'm honoring you, and the other one's supposed to be mockery, right? But if you can tell which one it is, more kudos to you, because I personally cannot tell. All right, so what are stereotypes? Stereotyping actually comes from actual physical activity. In the 1690s, they created something called the stereotype. This actually comes from printing, where they're able to use printing plates and they create a stereo effect, right? So your eyes look at them and you're able to decipher it. Prior to stereotyping, everything was printed on single plates. It was super hard for them to do so, and it was also hard to read. So when you think of stereotyping, you got to think of things like stereo sound, right? When you turn on stereo sound, it's easier for your ears to pick up all the different sounds and noises, and you're able to hear environment effects, etc., like people walking in the background, and the sound comes from all different directions. Same is true when you're looking at stereotyping and printing. So that's where this comes from, the stereotype, right? However, today we think of stereotypes because of academics who took the idea of images and said that we also do this, our brains do something called stereotyping, which means that when we interpret data visually or auditorily or however, our brain fills in the gaps, and that gap filling is outside of our control for the most part, unconsciously. And we fill in those gaps with things from other kind of sources. And it's that kind of stereo input that allows us to understand each other. When I look at people, I immediately conjure up stereotypes of you. These are biases, and they bias our thinking for or against individuals within certain populations. So today when we go in to see people, how are you? We tend to immediately draw conclusions about them unconsciously and consciously. However, when we talk about stereotyping, usually we use it in the negative connotation. We look at characteristics that underlie justification for something called prejudice, which allows us to organize ourselves without provocation or justification to then disenfranchise those people that we are allied against them to perpetrate things like discriminatory practices, denial access to services, and any other kind of feelings that would be negative towards that specific individual and because of their participation in a perceived group. That's stereotyping. Now, when we move it up the ladder for the isms, stereotyping allows people to have control over people using systems like colonization, racism, sexism, ageism, and other social kind of isms. That's where we get system-wide use, a practice that allows things to happen, and then it opens up the door for specific abuse of those population groups. By the way, I'm not making any of this stuff up. This comes straight from the psychologists like David Marks and Sai-Jun Ko out of Oxford. They're not in the United States, by the way. Okay? Oxford's it's an international university in Britain. So, why do we care? Why are we talking about negative stereotypes, specifically to Indigenous people? Because in 2005, I was out of Syracuse and having fun, and they came out with this report, and it kind of shook the world. It said, this is the first time the American Psychological Association actually tackled this issue, and they've been studying it for a long time, and it's pretty rare for them to come out and be strong against something, pretty much anything. Pretty most of the time they're pretty gray on things. And so when this report came out in 2005, studying the effects of Native American stereotypes on youth, we digested it almost immediately. I think I was working with you, Mo, at the time, and I came across it, and I was just like, wow, this is something else. I was shocked. They made this recommendation: phase out all use of negative native-based stereotypes because they're harmful, and they wanted it effective immediately. I couldn't find like quotes from back then. I tried to go back and try to look at something. It just doesn't exist. So I pulled some current quotes from people. This is Paul Chat Smith. I've had a chance to meet with him. But he says actual living Indian people are invisible to most Americans, and this is why. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about the stereotype of indigenous peoples has replaced who indigenous people actually are. And it's these images, and that's what he's saying here. So these negative native-based stereotypes are harmful because they make people invisible. So let's take a moment to define the harms of stereotypes. What are these harms? This is usually where I turn it around and say, like, let's talk about, let's have a small like discussion, and you just kind of shout it out. So if you have something that you think is a harm, feel free to kind of shout it out. And then I'm going to see if you're right. We'll break it down. So I'll look at you and say, what do you think is a harm? Shout something out. Put you on the spot.
Well, the mascots, for one, were, like, for the teams, the football teams.
Is that just because I framed it that way?
Well, no, because every time I was watching before I even came here, the Super Bowl commercials came on, because Super Bowl is, like, the football is coming back around. And it always makes me think, yeah, your eyes do that thing. It always makes me think of people start painting their faces red and they go, ah! And
oh, yeah, there we go.
that just, it pisses me off, mind my language. But, and then people go, well, you should think that we're honoring you because that's what you do. Well, that's not what we do. We're not red. We don't run around going, that's not us.
Sure. Okay,
And
great.
we don't wear the giant feathers all the time, and that's just rude. And yeah.
Okay, good. So we got some harms there. Anybody else? Some harms, go ahead.
It normalizes Native people as a monolith rather than like hundreds of unique tribes.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good harm.
Halloween costumes.
Halloween costumes.
Halloween
so
costumes.
Costuming. A little bit of what
Costuming.
Kate says. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Anybody else? Yeah. We got. Kate, you have like 4 or 5 harms. You described them using lay terms, right? And then I think one of the super important harms is saying that we're all the same kind of people. This pan kind of presentation of self. Yeah. So this is actually the art of indigenous stereotypes that go beyond just. And this has made a huge impact. Like some of this art caused the Land O'Lakes butter to remove the stereotypical indigenous woman. And then all these other ones, right? So all these other ones have been like thrown on here. And I forget the name of this artist, but he's super famous. The person who founded a thing called Not Your Mascot was Tara Hauska, and however complicated this person is, what she says is the racist treatment of indigenous people and the use of red face of indigenous people has become intertwined with this teen pride and sense of you're not a real person and I'm just wearing my version of you, right? This is kind of what you're talking about, Kate. It makes it so that we're not real things. So let's break them down. So we have a few examples, and let's see if we can find those examples in this. Okay? That's the goal. Defining harms of stereotypes. This comes straight out of the APA. Right? This isn't me. This isn't Justin Chapp saying this is what it is. This is what the APA, the experts, the people who've been studying this, the people who know psychology, and I don't think anyone in this entire region compares to even any of these people that are in the APA. So, welcome. We have overt racism, macroaggression, and microaggression. Right? So racism and racial discrimination are attitudes and behavior that are learned and that threaten human development. That's what people are learning when they look at, when they're allowed to depict other people using negative stereotypes. When they're able to control your image. It's a macroaggression, and it allows them to act on microaggressions toward you. And it's also just straight up overt racism. If I can define who you are. It's also manipulation, control, appropriation, and a sense of self, right? Use of American Indian mascots, symbols, imageries, and personalities by school systems appear to have a negative impact on the self-esteem of Indigenous youth or Native American youth. This is what they've determined, the APA, as a specific harm. Putting out mascots and negative stereotypes, images, even if they're perceived as honoring and depict some kind of cultural relationship, still has manipulation and control, still has appropriation, and still has lowers people's sense of self because if they can't see themselves in the mascot or whatever is being used. To everyone's point about invisibility, removal, and co-opting messages. Uses of American Indian mascots, symbols, images, and personalities undermines the ability of American Indian nations to portray accurate and respectful images of their cultural spirituality and traditions. Right? To the larger point of, hey, we need, we have 592 distinct Native nations here. And when you have one mascot to rule them all, that's what happens. One mascot, one image, one nativeness governs them all. By the way, I'm getting all this from this PDF, so if you want to go to it, feel free. Discriminatory practice. This is where we have practices that are basically we're telling people it's okay to be discriminatory towards other people. Use of American Indian mascots, symbols, and images and personalities as a form of discrimination against Indigenous peoples that can lead to negative relations between groups. And we see this in multiple communities. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Becky? Okay. It's disrespectful and represents poor judgment. We're advising everyone around us that it's okay to use American Indian symbols, mascots, images, and personalities, even if it's in a detrimental manner, to illustrate the cultural identity of American Indian people through negative displays or interpretations of spiritual and traditional practices. What we're saying is it's okay to do these things. It's okay to disrespect other people. Right? It's probably not, right?
No.
It's okay to express poor judgment. All right. Promotes perpetual stereotyping as normal practice. And this is one of the ones I think that is being addressed today, right? This is what we're encountering today, right? So use of American Indian mascots, symbols, images, and personalities has a negative impact on other communities by allowing for the perpetuation of stereotypes and stigmatization of another cultural group. So, of course, the father of stigma is Goffman, right? And he talks about, hey, we all have these stigmas attached to us, which, if you don't know Goffman, go check him out. I don't have time to run into Goffman all night. I'm just referencing him because he's pretty amazing as the father of stigma. Okay, we touched on a lot of these things. I think Becky's going to touch on all of these, maybe most of them. All right, we're going to move the conversation. I tried to find something in here. So these are all the different mascots. Here's all the different things that have been through that we've kind of experienced through our lives. And then here's this guy walking with this girl, or maybe a girl, somebody gender neutral, maybe, I don't know. Really, you don't look like an Indian, right? This is what he says. And so essentially what they're saying in his mind, in this person's mind, they have an image that's been captured through all of these other things. Because keep in mind, I can only be in front of someone, unless I live with them, probably 3 or 4 times a year, right? Unless they're like in close proximity. While these images are in front of them thousands of times on repeat. And so it's those images that your brain relies on. That's all of us, not just, and I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how much you think you have control over your brain. You don't. It's these kind of images that control. And by the way, it affects us as well. And so what we're moving the conversation, and what, since 2005, this conversation's been occurring. I think when I was in school in 1991, this school in New York State went through this same kind of exercise to ask mascots to be looked at and evaluated. And we had a lot of negative interactions, right? People were really upset and said, hey, a lot of people came out and said, we want to keep this thing. And other people said, no, we don't want to. So why did New York State ask? Why is the conversation getting moved? Right? Because these negative lessons are not just affecting American Indian students, they recognize that they're sending the wrong message to all students. That's what the APA says. It's not about protecting Native kids, even though Native kids are receiving the self-esteem, etc. What we're doing is we're normalizing the practice. We're saying it's okay to do these things across the board. Now, the other thing they're doing is culpability. And this is where it gets sticky, because New York State is specifically saying they no longer want to be culpable or held accountable for these practices. Otherwise, they wouldn't do this. So when they codify something and they move it and they push the justifications in another direction, and they say, if you want it, then you can do it, but somebody else is not culpable for it. And personally, I don't like being culpable for any of this stuff. I don't like being told that I am now the person responsible for all of these harms. As a citizen of the Seneca Nation, I don't appreciate it. Right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're being asked to do as a nation. We're being asked to say, it's okay for all this. It's okay for this. It's okay to be invisible. It's okay for discriminatory practice, disrespect, poor judgment. And it's okay for perpetual stereotyping as normal practice. Because we say it's okay. And I think that at the end of the day, it's our children and the people, the next generations that are coming up, that are going to have to foot the bill. Because what happens when a student or a young person is harmed through this? The APA is saying this is happening. It's probably happened to everybody who's gone through these systems. And now, who's going to foot the bill? Who's going to? Because New York State says they're not culpable anymore. They're out of that game. So somebody is, and they've shifted it right onto us. I'm going to say the one thing that's the most controversial thing is we've been asking and we've been saying, hey, we were against colonization and we're against these things. And yeah, we find ourselves, participating in our own colonization and perpetuating it in ways that are going to continue to have psychological harms. Now, don't get me wrong, some youth are going to be perfectly fine, and they're going to find ways to overcome all kinds, but not every single youth is organized that way. So on that point, hopefully that's low enough point where Becky can uplift us.
On that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
I'm going to
so-
leave you with internalized racism and hand off the talk.
I'm gonna say,
Yeah.
I did deal with a lot of kids that are very brutal and mean and racist because of the stereotypes. Because I don't look native enough.
Mm, right.
Which is internalized racism about how natives should look.
Because I have the blonde hair and the blue eyes and I'm the pale skin.
Well, you see that political cartoon, right? So
So
Yeah.
I shouldn't be enrolled. And when I went and got a job at the Nation, how dare I work for the Nation? And that even came from some of our people.
well,
Because I don't look like a traditional native.
What's a tradition?
That's what I said. So that's where the harm of the stereotypes come from.
does that work? Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. You want to move it along, or you want?
Yeah.
So it's just left click.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I always scan up. And I'm thankful to be here, and I'm thankful you are all here. And it's always a pleasure to be around and work with Justin. And he always has plenty of things to say and share, and so I'm glad to be here. And so these, as far as I'm concerned, these are all kind of words I don't use on a daily basis, but I know what they mean. And and what I want to talk about today is my personal experience in regards to this issue, and particularly to start with my early experience. I was born and raised here at Allegheny, and I went through the Salamanca school system. The first, up to the middle of my 6th grade year, I went to school at, was known as the Red House Indian School, also the Allegheny Indian School. So we were all native, and from there we would come to Salamanca to the junior high, and and that was a real cultural change for us, and to suddenly be thrown into the mix, and that was basically my experience. I was a child through Kansua, so I carried that weight with me, and I still carry it today. But what I experienced at Salamanca was helpful to me in developing my thinking and my thoughts. As a teenager, I was exposed and became involved with the American Indian movement at about the age of 16. And my brother was living and working in Cleveland at the American Indian Center there at the museum. The Indian Center director at that time was Russell Means. And so there were just a lot of connections. We intermingled with, Dennis Banks and Clyde Belcourt and Vernon Belcourt, and it's so we just heard a great deal at that age. And I spent a summer in Cleveland, and then I came back here, and that was my 16th year, and I went back to school. And I remember I was a junior at Salamanca, and I was already, I had bumper stickers up on my locker, so when you open a door you saw all of these, Indian power and things like that. And so, and I know that a lot of the students and a lot of the faculty were just really didn't know how to handle it. And one day I was at the locker, and there was just not too far away from me, there was a gaggle of, I think they were like cheerleaders and stuff. And another one of their friends came in, and they all were in a big tizzy and excited. And I looked over there, and the one who came in, she had a hanger, and on her hanger she had a brown costume, and it had fringe on it, and all of this, and they were just all excited. And so I asked around to see what was going on, and it turned out that she was apparently going to be the mascot at Salamanca. And so she was going to be the warrior. So I spent that day just talking to the other Native students in the high school, and just telling them what I thought. And I didn't have any intention or foresee any purpose in it, but I shared with them and told them my feelings and what I thought. And they surprised me, really. And the next morning I was in homeroom and not really just looking at my own business, and the homeroom teacher said, Becky, there's some students at the door to see you. And so I looked, and there were, it was a group of Native students at the doorway. And so I went out there, and they said, Becky, we don't like that mascot. And, and we want to talk to somebody. And so I said, okay, I said, let's go start with the principal. We'll talk to the principal. And he didn't really want to deal with it. And so he kind of brushed us off, sent us to the superintendent's office. And at that point, I believe it was Dr. Paul Kirsch, and he listened to us, and make a long story short, by the end of the day, there was no mascot. And I recall she was quite heartbroken. I remember seeing her in the hallway crying, and it was quite distressful for her. But that was my first real encounter of actually speaking about this mascot business, and the idea of having this non-native individual go out and apparently believe she was representing who I was. And so that was something that was difficult for me to handle. As I said, I had already been exposed to the American Indian movement and all of these things which were happening. And about that time, they were also starting to speak up against the Cleveland baseball team and the Cleveland Indians, and so that became a long struggle. So from there, did I go left? Yeah. Okay. From there, I think it was my senior year at Salamanca, and we had a young lady come to live with us, and she was from New York City, and she was attending what they called a wall-less college, and they could go anywhere in the world to live for a few months and so forth, but she chose an Indian reservation, and somehow she ended up with us. I don't really know how, but she ended up with us for a few months. And so somebody at St. Bonaventure heard about her, and so they got in touch with her, and they wanted to interview her. So she said, Becky, you come along too. And so I went with her, and I had already talked to her quite a bit about about my thinking, and at that point, and St. Bonaventure University at that point, our neighbor, who actually, in my opinion at that time, and still in many ways at this time, knows very little about us. They were the Brown Indians, and they had a brown Indian mascot and a brown squaw mascot. It's a difficult word for me to say, but so we did go there, and one evening, and they did their interview and asked her questions, and they asked about me because I had on an AIM run, and so they were like, "What's AIM?" So I told them about what AIM was, and this was the result. In the next issue of the Bonaventure, they had an article, co-ed in Wallace College lives Indian culture, and so that plays into their idea of stereotyping and all of that. But I thought it was really interesting. They didn't have me really. They did mention me in the article, but didn't really have me bringing up the issue of mascots. But I think I did talk about it. But her name was Debbie, the young lady who was living with us, and she brought it up, and she said, "Why do you have the brown Indian as your school mascot? The Senecas resent it. What if they call the Cleveland Indians the Cleveland Dagos? It is degrading to other ethnic groups. Why not the Indians?" And so the conversation just kind of went from there. And so this article appeared. But what really I thought was interesting is that they also included a 2-year-old article. This was several years before Bob Lanier came down here, and he was adopted, and so that was, they threw that article in there. They reprinted it. Right next to this article is that Indians adopt Lanier, and so they wanted to show that, hey, it's okay, that what we do is, yes, we're honoring the Senecas, and look, the Senecas like us, look what they did. They adopted Bob Lanier, and so I just thought that was really indicative of how they think in trying to maintain that control of the issue. So, let me see. The very next issue of the Bonaventure, this article appeared. So I think it kind of shook a few rafters over there, and so this individual here on a part of he was chairman of the board of athletics and the executive vice president at Bonas, and but he said the Brown Indian name has always been respectful. I can almost hear him say it, and so that was their way of again saying we do this to honor you people, and it just that kind of irked me, but that wasn't an experience I had, and again, I learned from it. So, as luck would have it, I ended up at Bonas several years later as a student, and I lived in a dorm on campus, and for some reason I had I think half the cheerleading squad was on my floor, and so they had the they still had the brown squaw and the brown Indian, and every year they would pick them. The student body would pick them, and so they had this process where they essentially they demonstrated their skills before the student body, and they would pick whoever they thought was best representing their roles. And they would do it during the dinner hour. And I remember, I wasn't expecting it. I was unaware of that. So I remember being in the Hickey Dining Hall and sitting at a table with my friends, and all of a sudden this commotion started. And what they would do is these ones who wanted to be these mascots would get up on the dining table and just do all of this terrible stuff. And on the tables, and the students started going crazy, and they would cheer, and and I just sat there. I was like stunned, and the part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to throw my food at somebody, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and just what they were doing, and so I thought about it, and I spoke to some people. I didn't like it, and basically other students, and so the president of the student senate, I remember he sought me out. He found me, and he said, Becky, he was very nice. He said, Becky, he said, if you want to print some, put anything out, let me know, and we'll help you. We got paper and all that, whatever you need. And so I said, okay. So so I wrote something up, and like typewriters in those days, and I think they had the old it wasn't even a Xerox, it was the old printing machines, and but this is what I wrote, and this was like 50 years ago. And it says, your lack of sensitivity to a proud people is being continued by your epitomizing the stereotyped image of the American Indian via the brown squaw and brown Indian. You are unintentionally, because that's how they look at it, oh no, we're not doing this to harm you, but you are unintentionally allowing this insensitivity to continue, and by its continuance, you have given an ugly stereotype image fertile ground in which to flourish. We are not a symbol, a mockery. We are a people, a proud people. Through such unhealthy traditions, you present the American Indian as something to be laughed at, not to be taken seriously, therefore not granting due respect. What illusions, stereotypes, and ugly myths are perpetuated in the minds of the unsuspecting. The myths live on and the fantasies are fed Our cultural heritage is attacked, our pride destroyed. Stop entertaining fans and creating school spirit at the expense of human dignity. Strive for truth, not misleading representations. It will be much more rewarding in the minds of Indians and non-Indians alike. We are not clowns, we are not symbols, we are not nicknames, we are a proud people with dignity. Indians are Indians when they are born and when they die, and all the time in between. Indians are Indians or they are not. Reevaluate your need for brown Indian and brown squaw. And so I printed that. And,
You need to print it again every day.
the next few days, I went in and passed them out and posted them on bulletin boards and things like that. And of course, there was a backlash. You know, there were letters to the editor in the school paper, and you know, I was apparently, one used the word too educated. You know, essentially, you know, who's she to, you know, she shouldn't even be here. You know, she's an Indian. You know, so that's how I took that, and so that was something I experienced. The issue came up, and it kind of, you know, flourished for a while, and I thought it was interesting that a number of the candidates to be these mascots came to my dorm room and wanted me to help them. And, you know, because they want it to be accurate and they want to do it right. And I just said, no, I don't want it. I don't want to help you, you know, and have a nice day. And so that was, you know, just part of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, like I said, that's like 50 years ago. And, you know, so here we are still today talking about this issue. And, you know, and looking at the current status of things. And this school I thought was very interesting. This is today, okay? This isn't 50 years ago, but this is today. And this is the Port Natchez Groves High School in Port Natchez, Texas, which is in the Houston area. And they are the Indians. This is what they do every football season. And they have a squad over here. They're known as the Indianettes. And the name for their mascot is Indian Spirit. Their school song concludes with INDIANS, scalp 'em, Indians, scalp 'em. And so it's just a severely deranged and harmful practice that they see is an honor. They feel they are honoring the indigenous people. They have been contacted by the Cherokee Nation in Texas, who, because of relocation, they're no longer over in the Carolinas. They're in Oklahoma and they're in Texas, and but they have received a letter asking them to cease and desist, and you know, that the Cherokees find this harmful, you know, they inaccurate, and but you know, it continues because they view it as a tradition. And I saw this and recognized this at St. Bonaventure too, that and you know, all these situations, I believe that it's a tradition. It's our tradition, and even so much that in an article supportive of this high school here and their mascot, they said that it's a tradition that is handed down to the students generation after generation. You know. And that's something that as Native people, we do for real. You know, what we have to pass down is about life. And what they pass down is being a clown. And these cultures that they develop in these schools, whether they're colleges or high school, you know, are very dangerous. And even today at St. Bonaventure, I go to, you know, some basketball games, and even today, even though they did finally get rid of their name and their mascot, they are now the Bana Wolves or something to that effect. You have alumni, not just at Bona's, but at other schools who no longer want to donate because they've changed the mascot. And so you see that across the board. You know, you see that backlash that I confronted. And so it's just, it's so deeply ingrained and that they have no comprehension now. They're incapable. They're incapable of realizing the value of human dignity.
Mhm.
And it continues, we still see it today. Kansas City, I don't ever watch the games unless, of course, they're playing the Bills. Then, I have to sit there and grit my teeth. And, but, they love to do their tomahawk chop. And you see that on television. They have some giant drum that somebody gets to beat. And, in this case, this man has on a Colts jersey, and he's got arrows protruding from his body, his shirt. And so they say it's an honor. And they say they have the support of the local Native community in maintaining their team name. And so it continues. And it's hard to believe, although yes, Washington, took the big step and they made a change, and they're now the commanders, and I applaud them for that. And 'cause they had one of the most egregious names for their team. So my personal experience in my lifetime, these are kind of old, and they're from the 90s and into the 50s, but I was still alive, and I'm already around by then. And I thought it was interesting in my research on Seneca women getting to vote. I came across these two articles, and I was just like, when I read them. Just seeing the headlines for these articles. And basically, the background is, New York State, they got wind that Seneca women and Mohawk women wanted the right to vote, and they were trying to, get those things passed through referendums and, here amongst us. And so the governor of New York, wanted to jump on a bandwagon, so he got some legislation to be passed that said, that Indian women should be allowed to vote in tribal elections, but he kind of qualified it by saying, with the approval of the tribal council. So that's just how New York State thinks. They always want to try to think they're on top of the issue, and they have, trying to step on our sovereignty. And so that was the background. But these were some articles that appeared at that time. The article down here, squaws get chance to squawk. And the headline was sick. The article itself was basically factual and informational, and the article wasn't bad. But the one at the top, squaws on warpath for voting rights drum up support at Albany powwow. This is an article that appeared in the New York Times. And I'll just read the first couple paragraphs. It says, word reached this white man's legislative stockade today that big new trouble is brewing among the Redskins. Woman trouble. The squaws are reported on the warpath and trying to break out of the tribal political reservations. They want the right to vote in Indian elections. So the palefaces here have prepared a law for what appears to be the inevitable day when squaws prove that their place is no longer in the teepee. So that was their view of what was going on. This photo here, it just going through the Olean Times Herald one day, and I was like, what? And 10 little Indians? No, little dogs. And I was just, so the media was guilty of this probably long before, say, the mascot issue began, because it was the media as early as, I'm talking about the media here in America, and their how they presented us in the newspapers and in printed materials and so forth. It was a very negative portrayal. You can go through the early issues of the Salamanca Press, which actually began, I think, in 1867, and you see it again and again and again. And they're talking about us here at Allegheny, and so they, you can see even in the 50s. In the 90s, the thinking, is still there. I'm sure hopefully you wouldn't find that happening today. But, so it's not just schools and universities with their mascots, but it's conveyed in the media. Justin already covered, some of this information, but I thought these quotes were interesting. And it says, using these harmful stereotypes perpetuates a long history of uninformed depictions of Native peoples and violence, as well as undermines the educational learning environment. And that's the National Congress of the American Indian, the NCAI. And but the second quote from the American Psychological Association, and Justin already touched on this particular quote, but there was something, again, it was in line with what the NCAI said. The use of American Indian mascots as symbols in schools and university athletic programs is particularly troubling because schools are places of learning. These negative lessons are not just affecting American Indian students, they are sending the wrong message to all students. And this was a photo that appeared in the Salamanca Press. This was a second grader at Prospect School at Halloween time. And he's dressed as George Armstrong Custer. And I don't think I need to do a presentation on him, but I think a second grader. What second grader comes home and says, "Hey, Dad, I want to be George Armstrong Custer for Halloween," that this is fodder for the dinner table. This is an adult decision, I believe. And it's something I saw. I remember in high school, going to school with an individual from 7th grade to 12th grade. We were in many classes together, and just went through all those 6 years, talking to one another and working on projects together and so forth. And our senior year, I saw him blow up in class, and he turned right around and looked at me when he said, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but I thought about it later, and I thought, he didn't just make that up. That just didn't all of a sudden happen.
Mm-hmm.
He was raised with that information. He was raised to think that way. And that's something he hears at the dinner table, and from the adults in his life, and from Salamanca. So, in closing, I think you can still take pride in change. Okay, and as you can see, I like to do crazy pictures, and I was at a gym for a basketball game, and I was like, so, but you can take pride in change, and change can be good. We meet, all through our lives, we meet challenges, whether we're children or whether we're old, in our 90s, we're going to be challenged. And we can change that. We can change those challenges. We don't have to just hold on to them and carry them through life. And, they can change our outlooks on life. And the most important thing is, I believe, they can show us that we can change things in our lives. If there's a problem that we're going through that's our personal problem, we can change. We can make that difference in our lives. And that should be an encouragement to tell us that, hey, I'm capable of meeting these challenges, I'm capable of meeting these changes. Because, as I mentioned before, there's such an attachment for these people who go through these educational systems, and their attachment to their mascot, and that, oh, we just got to do it, and they all say, I think it's standard fodder. They all say it's an honor. We're honoring you, and so we get lost in that conversation, because you don't want to get after somebody who's honoring you. But we can make those changes. And a lot of schools have. A lot of high schools, a lot of colleges and universities have made those changes. And even though there are still diehards who want to hang on to the old days, and that's anywhere. And change can be a good thing. It can be a healthy thing. And, I would just, always encourage, a change. Not just piecemeal, but across the board. Everybody, whether it's an all non-native high school, or whether it's a native high school, whatever it is, change, end it, get rid of it, because it's not healthy, and it does nothing to produce positive things, and all of this talk about it instills pride or things like that. I think that's a lie, and so I would just encourage people to think about it, and that's how I feel. So I want to thank you for coming. I don't know if you have any questions for
So they
Justin or
could put
myself.
stomping instead of scalping.
What's that?
They could put stomping instead of scalping.
Well,
Well, it'd be the same thing. I mean,
Another
So-
part of
And
the
the next
conversation that always gets lost, or not so much lost but forgot about, is like the emotional labor that we have to do to re-educate people. So like not only are we dealing with like the subconscious effects of all of the mascot and the media imagery and stuff like that, but now that they're being told that that's wrong, we're saddled with that emotional burden of like people coming to us and being like, what do we do now? How are we supposed to do this? And now we have to parse through all that damage that's been done and tell people like, ugh, like it's not fair, like we're being treated and bombarded with this messaging, and then we have to correct it at the same time. Like that's another part of it that's a larger issue, because it's at some point when you throw your hands up and you're like, okay, whatever, I don't care anymore.
Never.
You gotta pick your fights.
Yeah. So, well, I will. So in to your point, in 1991, when they were going through this in Salamanca, I came out and said, I came out with like hey, we're gonna create mascots for all these communities. So I created these things like the Steenberg pine cones, and like Kilbuckians, stuff like that, right? And Salamanca, we called them the silly salamanders, right? We ran around, and I was doing this stuff kind of. It was tongue in cheek, but to get away from the emotional labor of having to go through this, we were using humor.
Yeah.
And I was attacked. I was shoved into a locker, and my books kicked around, and I was like, I'm not going to say who the person was, but he was pretty aggressive, and he was a football player, and I was a freshman, right? And he slams me around and gets after me and says, "We're the Warriors." And I don't know, he's hyped up on steroids or whatever he's got going on, right? He got something going on in his life. But that's how serious it was. That's how, and so sometimes they won't tolerate and by they I mean people who want to have these mechanisms and systems to control and maintain. They won't tolerate the boundaries established, even if it's through humor or through any kind of other way.
And for them, it's telling them that they're wrong, and no one
Right.
likes to be told that they're wrong.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and then it just keeps like just this conflict over and over. But if people come at that's why it's like so important to come with solutions and suggestions rather than say like, this is bad, this needs to change. Okay, well how? So like present a path forward versus creating a wall that we still have to climb over at some point.
I said we've gotten told being out in public. The bad part is with all the mascots, it's like we're unicorns because we're mythical creatures, and we've literally been told that we're no longer alive, and the mascot been told that. And because the history books present us as we're not alive, and the mascots present us as we're just these people, and
But we don't look like those people.
and we don't look like these people, so we're no longer here, and nobody knows about us. So, and then when we try to say yes we are, we get, like you said, we get hit with that wall, and then we try to re-educate, and I don't want to ever throw my hands up. I don't want my daughter to throw her hands up and be like, I don't want to be Native, and I don't want to, I'm just going to go with the white part of me, and that's who I'm going to be. No, be proud of who you are, and this is who you are. And any future children, I want them to be proud of their Native heritage.
So yeah, so I think we're playing on a little bit of this, and I think Becky gets to, in her presentation, there's like good synergy here. So we have the emotional labor, and some people just choose not to undertake the emotional labor. They just say, you know what, I'm just going to accept the stereotype, internalize it, or they reject it all completely and say, I want nothing to do with this. This is ugly, and I don't want anything. I'm out. And it's easier just to get along. By the way, that's also my experience. So after getting attacked, like, do you think I went around and did more of it? No. Nobody came to my rescue. Nobody saved it. Right? So by the time I was junior, right, I didn't do any of the emotional labor. I didn't do any of that. I didn't do any of the labor, the activism labor. Instead, I was like, hey, what's good is good, right? Did the cheers and did all that stuff. I just wanted to get along. I didn't want to get into this stuff anymore. I chose to fight other things and not this here. So, and then how does it get internalized now, right? So now we go around and we have to talk. And I say these things. So this is a second presentation. It's on Indigenous identity where I'm a reluctant participant, right? I'm reluctant to do these things. And nobody's saying, because number one, nobody's telling you, hey, you sign up for this either. But I'm reluctant because this isn't like my chosen path. This isn't something I'm choosing to do. This isn't something I'm saying, yeah, I can't wait to get out there and change these stereotypes. Also, I think as you can see on the video and right in front of you, like, I don't fit these stereotypes. Like, it's easy for me not to do this, right? I don't have to do this at all. I can walk around and pass easily. I can go and do whatever I want in large mainstream society, right? So it's easy to go around and say, yeah, I can simply just ignore the tomahawk chop if I want to. I don't have to take it personally, right? And a lot of people say that too. So that's the other part of it, right? Oh, you're taking it personally. If you go around and say, what's going on with you? We're just honoring you. How come you're taking it personal? And if you look at anything long enough, then you're going to find a problem with it. I hear all these things, and when I hear when people say that, and to your point about, hey, what's the solutions? What's being offered? Well, I think those solutions have been around for a long time. What do you think, Becky? I think people have been saying, and maybe we need to have a follow-up to say, hey, these are the paths, right, that people have taken, because there's clear paths out there. I'm kind of saying, okay, anybody who's late to the game, anybody who's doing that, the solution for me is I'm going to look at your money sources, just like we did with the R-word team in Washington. I'm going to look at your money sources. I'm not. What am I? What? I got no skin in this game, right? What am I worried about? So if you're receiving federal impact money, if you're receiving Title VI money, if you're receiving these kind of monies in your educational institutions serving Native kids, then I'm going to go to those institutions. I'm going to make sure the feds take a good hard look at who they're giving money to. And it doesn't matter who said yes or who said yay, because it's the APA that they should be listening to. Not to my feelings, not to my personal pro or con or Stockholm Syndrome psychological effect or conditioning and love of some kind of practice. If those practices are disproportionately affecting a disparate indigenous peoples, then I'm not going to be reluctant anymore. I'm going to go in there and say, this is what needs to happen. And I guarantee you, I've done this in other areas, NCAI is going to back my play. And I'm going to get 5 people on an NCAI board, education board, and they're going to go straight to the federally impacted schools, and they're going to go to the Title VI DO Department of Education, and they're going to petition and lobby and saying, you're putting your funding in jeopardy. Boom. So, or you can do what everybody else has been doing. Do the right thing. Figure out a new way. Stop putting it on us.
There's
There's
different mascots out there that they can choose from. Mm-hmm. They don't have to pick us. We're not a mascot.
Like the silly salamanders.
Yeah.
Come on, hellbenders.
They could be a rock
awesome.
for all I care. I don't care.
I like the hellbenders.
Yeah. Anyway, so we don't want to talk. We don't want to talk about specific things here. I think. By the way, I saw Becky's presentation of this, just a brief of it, at Bonaventure. And there was people in the room who did not like what she had to say. And I was sitting right next to them. They didn't know who I was. And they started grumbling and getting upset. And all she was doing was truth-telling, telling her lived experience, which is valid. And everybody in that room should have listened to what she had to say. And I think that's a part of this story as well, because people are being discounted. They're not being given space to talk. Instead, being told that I'm going to discount and invalidate people's positions on just because of this specific issue.
White
Right.
people aren't taught how to sit with uncomfortable feelings.
What's that?
I said white people aren't taught how to sit with uncomfortable feelings. We're not taught how to sit with that sense of shame, that sense of, okay, I'm doing something wrong, but it's something I care about. How do I resolve that internal emotional conflict?
Yeah.
There, in terms of like, it's not okay for people to discount the lived experience of an elder, no matter what community they're coming from.
Right.
White elder, black elder, Seneca elder, you know,
Latino elder.
Any demographic.
any
Right.
demographic, queer elders, like whatever you want. It's not okay to discount the lived experience of someone speaking up. But when that lived experience challenges a sense of identity, white people aren't taught how to be uncomfortable with their identity.
What's interesting is this. You were there, Becky. You can correct me if I'm wrong. The students that came up afterwards gave the most deferential respect and honor of Becky as a human being. Not just because of the content of what she was presenting, but I think because of her ability to convey meaning and connection to them and develop relationships with them. And I couldn't have been more pleased. And I think that's kind of what I thought you were going to present today as well. I thought you did. It really expanded on it in ways that really enlightened me. And
I think it's been my experience in life, and looking around the room, I think I'm the oldest one in the room. You know, but I learned a long time ago that it's frustrating to try to change the world. And and I found it was unhealthy in many ways in how it affected me. And what I do now, and what I learned to do, is that I focus on my community, I focus on my family, you know, and I focus on my job, which is digging into the history of our people. And putting that together and just, you know, putting together a room full of facts so that in the future, you know, our people can look at that information and know, you know, what the truth is. And so that's how I deal with it, by helping my own family, by helping my own community, by helping my own people. And because I can't change the world around me. I can't change white America. And it can be harmful to me to try. Talking about my emotional health, you know, and what it can do to you. It can really tear you up. And and I get enjoyment from that, and I get peace. I get peace with doing that. And and at my age, I could say that I'm pretty acquainted with humankind, in that I know, and I have somewhat of an understanding of what they're capable of the kind of evil they're capable of the goodness they're capable of. And so that's how I look at it. And you know, I don't expect the world to change because we did presentations tonight, you know. But you know, we're just sharing, you know, telling you our experience and what we've learned, and so that you can see, you know, like I said, 50 years I've been going through this, you know, so. You know, we're still here, we still have mascots, and so, but You know, you just educate, you just share that information with people. And that's the best we can do many times.
Mhm.
If you change something, that's great, you know, more power to you. But, you know, so that's where I am at.
Well, all I was gonna say is, one time, when Becky was in school, she told us today that she shared her feelings about an issue, and came from a position of knowledge, passion. She carried the emotional labor of the decision, right? So emotion, she had some, and this practice changed, right? And I think if we put that poem back up there and kept it up there, people would read it and be confronted with the reality of what we can do if we actually look and embrace change and see. And we don't, you know, we can put that poem in the archives rather than, you know, dust it off every 50 years.
I don't know, paint it on a wall.
You know,
I like the poem.
Yeah.
Paint it on
I
a wall.
like it.
Put it up, make it big, make it public.
Oh no, Becky, I'm sorry.
Ignore me, I'm the white person in the room. Don't listen to me.
Oh no. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other? No?
Well, Yahweh for inviting us.
Yeah.
Good.
Being here.